Mary Louise Cecilia Texas Guinan, January 12, 1884 to November 5, 1933, was an American actress, producer, and entrepreneur. Born in Texas to Irish immigrant parents, she decided at an early age to become an entertainer. After becoming a star on the New York stage, the repercussions of her involvement in a weight loss scam motivated her to switch careers to the film business. Spending several years in California appearing in numerous productions, she eventually formed her own company. She is most remembered for the speakeasy clubs she managed during Prohibition. Her clubs catered to the rich and famous, as well as to aspiring talent. After being arrested and indicted during a law enforcement sweep of speakeasy clubs, she was acquitted during her trial. Guinan was one of 4 siblings born in Waco, Texas, to immigrants Michael and Bessie Mae Duffy Guinan, who had immigrated separately as adults, meeting and marrying in Colorado. Both parents were of Irish ancestry. They initially operated a wholesale grocery business. Relocating to Texas, they ran a horse and cattle ranch. As a child, she was nicknamed Mamie and attended parochial school at the Loretta Convent in Waco, Texas. Growing up on a ranch provided her with basic cowboy skills, and she honed her marksmanship at a local shooting gallery. In 1898, her parents were successful in securing her a 2-year scholarship to the American Conservatory of Music offered by Chicago businessman Marshall Field. After developing her soprano vocal talents and finishing her studies, she joined a touring acting troupe that featured American Wild West entertainment. By 1904, using the name Marie Guinan, she married newspaper cartoonist John Moynihan on December 2. 2 years later, Moynihan took a job in Boston. The couple eventually divorced, and Guinan moved to New York to pursue a career as a singer in the entertainment business. For years, she claimed she had been born with the name Texas, and never let facts stand in the way of her narrative. In a full-page 1910 interview in the San Francisco Call, she stated her father was the first white child seen in Waco, although he had been a married adult when he arrived, and white settlers had been there since the early to mid-19th century. Theater critic and photoplay editor Julian Johnson was her companion for a decade, and was influential in the creation of her public persona. Many erroneously believed them to be married. Her 1933 obituaries mention Johnson as her second husband, and millionaire Georgie Townley as a third husband. Lacking any verification that the latter 2 marriages took place, Moynihan is now believed to have been her only husband. Johnson's connection is thought to have led to a poem carrying her byline being printed in photoplay. An alleged connection to the U.S. Senator from Texas, Joseph Weldon Bailey, evolved over time from a non-specific tie to her family, to Guinan's being the senator's niece. The niece relationship seems implausible, since her parents were born and raised in a different country than either Senator Bailey or his wife. Mentions of him coincide with the timeline of her association with Julian Johnson. While he was editor at Photoplay, an article written by then-staff journalist Adela Rogers St. John's remarked that Guinan bore a distinct resemblance to her uncle, Senator Joe Bailey of Texas. Initially finding work as a chorus girl, she adopted the stage name Texas Guinan to give herself an edge in the competitive marketplaces of vaudeville and New York theater productions. Within a year, she had the female lead in a stage production of Simple Simon Simple, during which she accidentally shot herself on stage with a loaded gun. In 1908, she received favorable notices for her performance in the Gibson Girl Review. That same year, she placed an advertisement in newspapers offering $1,000 to any songwriter who provided her with a song of equal popularity to the Gus Edwards pen That's What the Rose Said to Me. She appeared as a soprano vocalist in many productions, including The Gay Musician, The Hoyden, and The Lone Star. She had achieved a degree of national stardom by 1910. John P. Slocum managed her when she appeared in his multi-year touring production of The Kissing Girl. When Ned Wayburn rolled out his production of The Passing Show on a national tour in 1913, Guinan was one of the headliners. Coinciding with the publicity for the tour, Guinan licensed her name and image to be used by W.C. Cunningham for a weight loss plan. The advertisements that appeared in media across the country claimed Guinan had lost 70 pounds on the plan. Investigative journalism by the Chicago Tribune alleged that Guinan knowingly acted as a shill-in perpetrating a fraud upon the public. A subsequent investigation by the Postal Service revealed it to be a swindle. United States Postmaster General Albert S. Burleson quickly acted to prohibit Guinan from receiving mail through the Postal Service. Although she continued on the stage, the incident damaged her career, and was a motivating factor in expanding her repertoire by trying her hand in the California film business. Guinan appeared as Zaza in the variety show Hapo My Thumb, based on a French fairy tale of the same name. The show opened at the Manhattan Opera House November 26, 1913, and closed January 1, 1914. She toured the United States with the Whirl of the World musical comedy in 1915. The tour coincided with her unverified account of being casually approached in Berlin by Kaiser Wilhelm II, who engaged her in conversation as she sat alone reading a book. She appeared in the musical Gate Parade that opened at the Schubert Theater on August 18, 1925 and closed on January 30, 1926. Guinan was part of the cast of the musical Padlocks of 1927, also at the Schubert. In a film career that began in 1917 and continued through 1933, she was part of the vanguard of women filmmakers in the United States. Her later claims of being in France in 1917 entertaining the troops, and being decorated with a bronze medal by France Field Marshal Joseph Joffre, has been proven false by the timeline and California location of her prolific filmmaking. Triangle Film Corporation, founded in 1915 by Harry Aitken and Roy Aitken, featured Guinan in 4 two-reel shorts between 1917 and 1918, The Fuel of Life, The Stainless Barrier, The Gunwoman and The Love Brokers. Unlike the musical genre she was known for on stage, she was now moving towards the Western movies genre, and on her dressing room door appeared a map of the state of Texas, rather than her name. Triangle began billing her as the female Bill Hart in reference to the industry's first Western star who at the time topped fandom popularity polls. Froman brothers were Broadway producers. In 1915, brother Daniel Froman and partner William L. Sherrill formed the Froman Amusement Corporation, a motion picture business. They made more than a dozen films with Guinan in 1918, including The Boss of the Rancho in the Heart of Texas. During her years with Bullseye Productions/Reelcraft, she began to expand towards the production end of filmmaking, as a unit department head on the films Acquitted, The Lady of the Law, The Girl of the Rancho, The Desert Vulture, and at least 5 other productions. She created Texas Guinan Productions in 1921 to produce Code of the West, Spitfire, and Texas of the Mounted. After I Am the Woman in the Stampede for Victor Kramer Film Features, she returned to New York. Guinan was again seen on the screen with 2 sound pictures, playing slightly fictionalized versions of herself as a speakeasy proprietress and queen of the nightclubs, 1929, and then Broadway Through a Keyhole, 1933, written by Walter Winchell, shortly before her death. The 1920 18th Amendment to the United States Constitution put prohibition into effect, making sales or transport of alcoholic beverages illegal. While it ruined legitimate businesses, people continued drinking alcohol. Those who transported and sold it were known as bootleggers. Thus began the establishment of the speakeasy private clubs, a cultural phenomenon in which Guinan excelled. Her introduction into the business was when speakeasy partners Emile Gervasini and John Levi of the Beaux-Arts Club hired Guinan in 1923 as a singer, for which she was paid $50,000. Guinan's give-and-take dialogue with the customers inspired producer Nils Grandlin to put together a full floor show with Guinan presiding as MC for Zietfeld Follies Chorus Girls. Bootleg huckster Larry Fay struck a deal with them to feature the show at his Al Fay Club on West 47th Street in Manhattan. There, she became known for her catchphrase, "Hello, sucker. Come on in and leave your wallet on the bar." In return for being the draw to attract wealthy and powerful clientele, Guinan received 50% of the profits. Ruby Keeler, Barbara Stanwyck, and George Raft were discovered by talent scouts while working as dancers at the club. After being shut down by the police, she opened the Texas Guinan Club at 117 West 48th Street, also closed by the police. She and Fay later opened the Del Fay Club in Miami the same year. By her own account, they once took in $700,000 in less than a year. When Guinan returned to New York in January 1926, as hostess of the 300 Club at 151 West 54th Street, the opening night's event was the marriage ceremony for actress Wilda Bennett and Argentine dancer Abraham Pepito Dalbrook. Other celebrities who visited her club were Al Jolson, Scottish operatic soprano Mary Garden, Jack Dempsey, American operatic soprano Geraldine Farrar, and the Prince of Wales. In July 1926, the 300 Club was raided by the police, who seized bottles of liquor and arrested 2 people for violation of the section of the Penal Code forbidding suggestive dances. The last week of June 1928, Assistant U.S. Attorney General Mabel Walker Willebrand ordered a raid of speakeasy clubs in New York. Guinan, Helen Morgan, hostess of Shea Helen Morgan, Nels Granlund, and 104 others were arrested and indicted by a federal grand jury. Guinan, Morgan, and Granlund faced 2 years in prison, with a $10,000 maximum fine if convicted. The others indicted were employees and patrons, who faced lesser penalties. At her April 1929 trial, Guinan was acquitted. During the Great Depression, she took her show on the road. She attempted to move to Europe, but Scotland Yard threatened to board her ship if she tried to land in England, where she was on their list of barred aliens. The show was banned from France under labor technicalities. Guinan had a contract with a Paris club, but French employment laws dissuaded non-citizens from working in France. She turned this to her advantage by launching the satirical revue Too Hot for Paris upon her return to the States. While on the road with Too Hot for Paris, she contracted amoebic dysentery in Chicago, Illinois, during the epidemic outbreak at the Congress Hotel during the run of the Chicago World's Fair. The epidemic was traced to tainted water. She fell ill in Vancouver, British Columbia, and died there on November 5, 1933, aged 49, exactly 1 month before Prohibition was repealed. 7,500 people attended her funeral. Bandleader Paul Whiteman was a pallbearer along with 2 of her former lawyers and writer Haywood Broun. Guinan is interred at the Calvary Cemetery in Queens, New York. Her family donated a tabernacle in her name to St. Patrick's Church in Vancouver in recognition of Father Louis Forget's attentions during her last hours. When the original church was demolished in 2004, the tabernacle was preserved for the new church built on the site. She was survived by both of her parents. Her father was 81 years old at his death on May 14, 1935, and her mother died at age 101 in 1959. The newspaper obituary listed his place of birth as Sherbrooke, Quebec, Canada, and his profession as a wholesale grocer. Her brothers Tommy and William P., as well as her sister Mrs. George C. Smith, also survived her. Actress portrayals of Guinan 1927, Broadway Nights, The Sasha Movers. 1945, Incendiary Blonde, Betty Hutton. 1961, The George Raft Story, Barbara Nichols. 1961, Splendor in the Grass, Phyllis Diller. Fictional characters based on Guinan. 1920's, Miss Missouri Martin, Damon Runyon's short stories about Broadway. 1932, Maudie Triplet played by Mae West, Night After Night. 1939, Panama Smith played by Gladys George, The Roaring Twenties. 1960, Sally Kansas played by June Havoc, episode The Larry Fay Story, The Untouchables. 1984, Vera played by Diane Lane, The Cotton Club. Texie Garcia, The Gun Moll of Alphonse Big Boy Caprice and Dick Tracy. Velma Kelly, The Musical Chicago, personality modeled on Guinan and backstory based on murder suspect Belva Gartner. Guinan, fictional bartender, played by Whoopi Goldberg, Star Trek, The Next Generation Miscellaneous 2007, Black Hats, as a character in the novel. How to Keep Your Husband Out of My Nightclub, Liberty, April 30, 1932, p. 50. Oh, Professor, College Humor, June 1932, p. 24.